Ah,
Mm.
all right. Welcome everybody to the Big Texas Author Talk. My name is Mandy Lynn Latta, and I'm the public classes coordinator for Gemini Inc., San Antonio's nonprofit writing arts home. And I have with me Cloud Cardona, who is our wonderful marketing coordinator, but she's also diligently working on tech for us tonight. We're really happy to have you here with us. And before we even get started with the Big Texas Author Talk, I would love to share the news for anyone who hasn't heard it that Gemini Inc. has just found a new home. So early spring, we're moving into a new building that's just a couple blocks down the street. We're working with UTSA to make that happen, and we're super, super excited to invite you into our new home this spring. And with that, because we are actively working on our new home, our end of year campaign this year is focused on the things that we need to move. So if you're interested in donating to help us with our end of year campaign, Cloud's going to join. Cloud is going to drop some information in the chat while we're talking. All right. And with that, welcome to the Big Texas Author Talk. This is now going to be a seasonal program where we feature authors from around Texas, people with Texas roots, born in Texas, raised in Texas, transplanted to Texas, folks who have books about Texas. And what we do here is have conversations with authors about their writing process and their new work. And we're really, really excited to feature Cyra Dumitru this month and have with her moderator Natalia Trevino. We are going to be having a conversation that will involve sensitive topics such as suicide. So if you feel like you need to step away at any time, we encourage you to step away as needed. But also, it's an important conversation and we would love your engagement. So if you hear anything that interests you during the conversation, please drop comments in the chat. We'll try and get to those comments during the Q&A section after the conversation. And with that, I'm going to read you bios. Tonight we are featuring Cyra Sweet Dumitru, and she is a published poet and instructor of poetry and one of 4 certified practitioners of poetic medicine in Texas. Her poems have appeared on the walls of City Hall, been spoken on national public radio and in museums, and appeared in city newspapers and national literary journals. Her collection of poems include What the Body Knows, Listening to Light, Remains, and Elder Moon. She offers therapeutic writing circles for adults learning to live with trauma, bereavement, depression, anxiety, and religious trauma. Cyra lives in San Antonio, Texas with her family. And moderating the conversation is Natalia Trevino. Her work captures the voices and lives of women who emerged despite everything that works tirelessly against them. Her first novel, The Road Back, is a testimony of an immigrant mother's journey to make life as a servant in the U.S. while separated from her daughter, and will be published with the Arte Publico in 2026. Her latest book of poetry, When You Were Human, will be published by Flower Song in 2026. A member of the Macondo Writers Workshop, Natalia has been working to increase young adult literacy since 1992. And with that, I will hand it over to you, Natalia.
Thank you so much, Mandy, and thank you to everyone at Gemini Inc. Who brought this event together and who has worked behind the scenes to bring this amazing audience together, this community. Cyra and I are so grateful. And with that, I want to just talk a little bit about how I met Cyra and tell you a little bit about her. Thank you, Mandy, for reading the bio. So we know her professional history and but I met Cyra over 30 years ago when we were both in Wendy Barker's poetry group or class. And I say that because I'm not sure which one it was, because with Wendy, class became group, capital G, and met inside and outside of the semester. And it went on for years after we all graduated, always in the home of one of our group members. So when Cyra and I are together, we are in the presence of Wendy,
Yes.
and always grateful to her for bringing us together and for everything she's done for us in our lives. And early on, I knew that Cyra had survived a deep tragedy in her life as a very young person, that she had survived the loss of her brother to a suicide. And yet I always sensed miracles around her. And now we have this amazing book, which touches, explains, and delivers some of those miracles to all of us who will read this book. So everybody, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And Cyra, thank you so much for welcoming me into your home tonight so we could have this amazing conversation. We both felt that it would be great to be in the same room. And we have some questions for you, but before we do, would you share with us some of your work, some of your reading, and let us hear what is happening inside this amazing book?
Thank you, Natalia. It would be my honor. And thank you again, Gemini Inc., for the invitation to be here. And truly, Natalia, thank you for being my partner in this conversation. And it really feels like a joy to share the conversation with you. And thank you, all of you out there, friends and family and just dear ones. It means so much to have you here being part of this evening. So thank you very, very much. And my brother David is here as well. His spirit is very strong, and he's a big part of this story coming together and part of helping to write the story. So I love having David here as well. The comments, the way that Natalia and I have thought about shaping our talk and the reading tonight is kind of under a theme that goes something like poetry and storytelling as bringing us clarity, consolation, and communion. And with that in mind, I have selected a kind of an extended excerpt that I'll read that I hope will reveal some of those aspects, poetry's clarity, consolation, communion, and will show the role, the relationship of poetry and prose in the memoir, because the two of them are blended throughout. And there are times where the poems are helping to tell the story. So the poems are part of the narrative flow. And there are other times where the poems are the subject of the actual chapter. And then there are dreams that get woven into this. So you'll get a sense of that coming together. Before I read this excerpt, there are 3 quotes by kind of different thinkers and folks from different disciplines. And I feel like they are interwoven into a larger wisdom. And I believe that they're going to be entered into the chat. 2 of these quotes are part of the memoir, and one of them is not. The first one is from the internationally renowned trauma expert, Bessel van der Kolk, MD. He is founder of the Trauma Research Foundation, and some of you might know his book, The Body Keeps the Score. And he says that the only way we can change the way we feel is by becoming aware of our inner experience and learning to befriend what's going on inside. And I think that verb, befriend, for me, is a very important verb and has been a really big part of my process. That quote is not in the book, but it should be in the chat. Then I have a quote from John Sanford, who is a Jungian analyst and Episcopal priest who wrote a book called The Kingdom Within. You will hear the word God referenced in this quote, and I would invite you to think of this word as ecumenical, non-denominational, and used in the most universal sense. God is as personal to us as our own inner creative process. Creativity comes when we make contact with living contents of the inner world, the inner fish, and bringing them to the surface, give them expression. In the creatively led life, we act in the image of God. And then the third quote is from a literary theorist, Lawrence Perrine, whose book Sound and Sense is considered kind of a classic. And he talks about poetry. Poetry is a kind of multi-dimensional language. I love that. Poetry is a kind of multi-dimensional language. It has at least 4 dimensions. If it is to communicate experience, poetry must be directed at the whole person, not just their understanding. It must involve not only their intelligence, but also their senses, emotions, and imagination. Poetry to the intellectual dimension adds a sensuous dimension, an emotional dimension, and an imaginative dimension. And I just briefly want to say that I think that the idea of poetry being directed at the whole person is true, both from the point of view of being the poet writing the poem and the poem allowing for the whole part of the personality to come through. And then hopefully for the reader of the poem, they're getting a sense of the poem appealing to their wholeness. Mm-hmm. So kind of with that as a kind of context, I'm going to read a portion of the memoir from chapter 7, just to give you a little bit of context here. So the book is in 2 parts, and the first part of the book really covers from kind of childhood all the way till about 20 years after David's death. And then the second part goes until pretty recently. So the whole book spans about 50 years. In chapter 7, this takes place about 12 years after David's death, after we've lost David to suicide. I am 28. David took his life when he was 19 in Cincinnati, Ohio, in our family home. I was 16, and I was the one person in the family who happened to be there at the time that this action took place. He did not die right away. It took a couple of hours. He was taken to the burn unit there at the University of Cincinnati. So we were living in Cincinnati, Ohio at that time. So what you will hear is me speaking and reflecting about 12 years after this. I have finally had some therapy, but what's been most important already to me is poetry and journaling. I already have a practice of poetry and journaling. You'll hear prose and poetry and dream all kind of blended in together. Who is at fault when a loved one commits suicide? Or should I ask, what is at fault when a loved one commits suicide? Is there someone or something that can be blamed? If my brother was feeling desperate enough to harm himself, was he really to blame? What caused such desperation? Depression? Was the depression really to blame? What about the circumstances of his life? When he died, he was living at home with parents and brothers and his sister. Didn't we fail him by not showing him enough that we loved him, believed in him? I was the last person to be with David before his desperate act. I had smelled a profound sense of gloom and doom wafting all around him. Yet I turned my back on him. What if I had spoken kindly to him in the kitchen, told him I would cancel my date and keep company with him? I can't shake feeling blameworthy, even though I mentally understand that depression took my brother's life. Illness of the mind and soul, Amid his suicidal despair, he was both himself and not himself. It is up to me to forgive myself. I dream of an earthquake, awakened with the word fault line in my mind. When I sit down to write, what comes first are the lines, sometimes the earth shakes with the taste of my dead brother. I straddle uneven ground and stretch. Thinking about the physical reality of an earthquake gives me a way to represent my inward state, how unsolid within myself I feel. I keep my attention on the idea of maintaining balance while experiencing the ground fall away, how I need to stretch. Then I admit to the poem that I long to hear David assure me that I am not at fault for his death. I yearn to wake on a deeper level, ready to live my life feeling blameless, free of trauma-related aftershocks, find some enduring inner peace. This poem emerges quickly, pretty much intact. I read the poem aloud and add the reference to the San Andreas Fault. Giving the poem a title is easy. The word fault line says everything. It acknowledges the landscape of earthquakes and implies the psychological state of the poem's speaker, me. Adding February reinforces the link to David. Through the pleasing element of musicality, the alliteration of F sounds, February, fault line, as well as the multisyllabic flow of these two words together, February, fault line. When I read the revised poem aloud, I feel relief that I have aired my long-standing feeling of guilt and found pleasure in making something beautiful from a hideous memory. My self-blame feels creatively externalized, quote, removed to the symbolic but vivid world of language, end quote, as poet Gregory Orr describes it in his book, Poetry as Survival. Admitting my self-blame in the form of a poem lessens my shame and lightens my heart. And here is the poem, February fault line. February, a month built along the San Andreas Fault. Sometimes the earth shakes with the taste of my dead brother. I straddle uneven ground and stretch. Oh, to sleep February straight through, to become a still horizon just for a few hours. No jolt to accusing light by the telephone ringing or the singing of utility wires outside. To awaken with silence and the calm words of the dead still thick upon me. To reappear, having invented myself anew and faultless, believing in deep places of rest. I bring February fault line to my graduate poetry writing workshop at the University of Texas at San Antonio a few days later, led by our beloved Wendy Barker. My peers comment on how the spacing between stanzas, as well as the placement of several lines, stretch and faultless, create a visual impression of the ground shifting. This had emerged naturally in my first draft, and I decide on keeping the unsettling effect generated by the spacing. The poem serves as an important psychological transition. It signals my readiness, as well as my desire to claim a new, definition of what it means to be a survivor of traumatic witness. I want to feel more secure, more grounded internally, rather than feeling at the mercy of unpredictable currents and triggers linked to trauma that is acknowledged, yet not fully processed. Soon after this poem, a dream arises in me that has an unprecedented tone. David has gained fame for creating something beautiful and significant. He is returning from a long, long trip during which he received an award for his creation. I meet him at the airport. He approaches as a grown, healthy man who smiles broadly when he sees me. Overcome by this joyful sight, I cover my tearful eyes with my hands and drop to my knees as David makes his way toward me. David's smile feels like an expression of forgiveness implied by the delight and the sheer love he radiates toward me. This dream heralds a crucial shift in my psychic relationship with my brother, a befriending process. A befriending process with David's memory begins. Having yielded to the disturbing images connected with David's death, I am open to receiving other images of him, such as reunion at an airport. Other healing dreams follow, several of which take place at the beach at Greenwich Point, where we spent our childhood summers before moving to Ohio. David's spirit, I believe, feels my need for healing and reaches out to me. I believe that the spirits of those we love who have died can assist us if we are open to them, perhaps helping us to heal, freeze their spirit on a deeper level. Gradually, my relationship with David lightens, expands as the poems that I write and the dreams that I dream reframe my connection to my brother. Other childhood memories surface involving David. I regain the fullness of David's life, moving beyond the disturbing nature of his dying. And now I'm going to leap just for a moment to into chapter 8, pages 92 and 93. I'm going to read one more poem and then we'll talk. The long process of confronting and reframing my memory continues over years, often with help of a metaphor rooted in the natural world. The Snake River in York, Maine is an estuary, a transitional world where salt water and fresh water merge. It empties into the Atlantic Ocean, the ocean into which Dad and Peter scattered David's ashes long ago. I had the chance to swim in this estuary, and as I'm swimming and I'm thinking about it as a merged world, I thought about David and the blessing of my now peaceful relationship with him. Sometimes I feel David's presence in the daylight world, and sometimes I dream again of a day at the beach with him. On this day, the merged world of estuary resonated with my lived experience that there is a spiritual realm, another kind of merged world where the dead, coming from a limitless ocean, and the living, coming from inland, can communicate in loving ways. So here is the poem. Estuary, the Snake River, Maine. And when I reference the you in here, I'm speaking to and about David. We still find ways to be together. I am the inland one, still dusting the childhood photos and stirring the stew, riding the coastal river downstream until the snake becomes thick as a tongue, as fresh water merges with salt. You press inward upon the infinite tide, more seaweed than flesh. We meet in a feast of remembrance, my face older than yours now, but still you are the elder brother, the one who inhabits the huge. When you tell me, listen, or your tongue shall make you deaf, I enter silence as we do the estuary, plunging off the bow of our small boat, jolt of cold, can't feel or see the bottom, shadows ripple beneath us as eels glide from grassy banks. We join hands and float on our backs, perfectly content that living means swimming with the dead. No. Thank you all for listening to that long excerpt. Thank you.
Well, I don't know if it was long enough. I mean, my heart is up in my throat. I am, I've read this, but hearing it in your voice, Cyra, is so moving and so powerful. And when our body starts to react and we start to have a bodily reaction, shaking or breathing changes as I'm experiencing, we know that it's so beautiful because our body knows that this is important to us, that this is an important experience. It is not a sign that I'm gonna fall apart and leave and run away. It's a sign that my body knows how important this is. And if your breath has also been taken away by this reading, I invite you to think about your body's reaction as just a miracle that your body knows this is so important and it starts to react. And as you said, poetry combined with your prose speaks to the whole person.
Yes.
And what a way of embodying that for us tonight. So thank you so much for that reading. And yeah, I see the hearts, and we should acknowledge this reading with emojis and hearts and whatever you want to do to give back, because snaps or claps or however you want to do this, because it does, well, we are celebrating the birth of this book and the deep revelations that are coming to us in the gift that is this book. And so feeling celebratory might feel like, what, how, how, and as it's been this, by giving us this gift of thinking about befriending, as your quote said, knowing what's inside of you and befriending it, difficult friend though it is.
Yes.
Difficult friend though it is, that might make us shake or cry. But befriending it, knowing that it is an awareness that widens our human experience, and that allows us to enter this other dimension that you got to near the, in this selection. That what a great way to frame. And this reading was just I want to talk about it for the rest of the day. I have 9 pages of questions here, and I'm done with all of them. But the way you framed so much and allowed us to experience this interaction, this current interaction, the line of the estuary and what it really is and what it really means as
well,
swimming.
And if I may about the estuary, I want to really speak to my gratitude to the natural world for being one of the sources of metaphors that could hold my inner experience of the relationship with David that changed over time. And I really believe that metaphor is one of the reasons why poetry does function in such a healing way, because a metaphor can become this container for holding multidimensional relationships between one thing and another. So what would an estuary, how would an estuary really relate to a human relationship? Well, it does on kind of a physical level and on an emotional level and a spiritual level. So every time that I could find a metaphor that communicated some of what I was feeling inside in a pretty whole way, I would literally feel an internal shift. I would feel immense relief. I would feel clarity, like, oh, okay, I understand this all the more, and there's the consolation of being able to express it into the writing. And now I'm in communion more with my own mind and more with my own spirit. And because I have a way to communicate it to others, I'm in communion with my reader. And I have felt that there is this larger spiritual presence that I call voice with a capital V that has continuously joined me throughout this process, but always shows up in the creative process, always shows up in the creative process. So metaphor.
Yeah.
Hooray for metaphor.
Hooray for metaphor, and hooray, and I know, and hooray for the natural world that can deliver.
That's right.
The natural world is so multidimensional, so alive with all of its nuances and all of its changes that it delivers just by experiencing it. And that was my question 4 was on metaphor. So when you just took us right into it. No, it's great. Because you mentioned this idea of the container, metaphor being a container. And I remember when we spoke together at the Bernie Book Festival on the healing power of writing, and you described metaphor in this way to our audience. And for me, that was one of the most vivid descriptions of the power of metaphor for poets as people, not just as writers, for people going through something that requires resonance or healing or reflection. And so that takes us to the story of metaphor where it really opened up for you. And would you talk a little bit about that story that is in the book, and you talked on that day about how things were recontextualized with your first encounter in that book you were reading to your children. This is a hard one, but it's a really powerful story.
So probably the most dramatic, my most dramatic awareness of an internal shift came when when my children were very small. So they were probably, I don't know, 3 or 5, 4 and 6 or something. I was reading a book about trees, and it was pretty factual. And I came across a description, of the eucalyptus tree, and how the eucalyptus tree begins as a seed inside of a very hard shell. And it needs fire to crack that shell and release that seed and be able to be transformed. It needs fire. And I had not been able to find a way to speak my actual experience of the moments of witnessing my brother's suicidal act, and I needed to kind of for my own. I needed to release that and get it out. I needed to find a safe container for it and not just have it in memory. So I needed a poem to do it, but I didn't want it to simply be sensational. Because that didn't honor the fullness of David. It just didn't. And there was something about this image. It was so it was using fire as a transformative image, which for me then made it very spiritual. So suddenly I realized that, and I excused myself from the children. I think at that point they had shifted to their teddy bears or something. And I went into my writing room and sat down and wrote a poem called Gift of Fire that references this passage from the trees. And the poem came out entirely intact, and it was huge for me. And I remember feeling so much lighter after I wrote it and going, why did that just happen? And I thought, it's the metaphor.
So amazing.
Yeah,
So
it was a
amazing. And it's
miracle.
the power, it is a miracle. And it's the power of reading, exposing yourself to reading
Yeah.
and reading widely, even
Yeah.
if it's to your children, and also accessing the natural world and just getting our
Yes.
facts from the natural world as a way of understanding this planet that we're on, this
Yes.
sometimes merciless planet that we're on, and sometimes merciful planet that we're on, right? It's got everything.
Well, and the patterns that the natural world shows us of seasons, of death and decay, and yet transformation. There it is. And it's comforting to me as a human being to have that mirrored, because it reminds me I too am part of the natural world, and these cycles are natural to being a human being, even if they're painful. It's part of a natural order. And if the trees can do it and the animals can do it, you know, I can do it.
Yeah.
And that's deeply comforting.
Deeply comforting. And the other thing that story takes me to, you talked about speaking language or speaking the experience and putting it into the container of language so that it can be shared. And there was, and in the passage you read, you actually wrote about the experience of workshop response.
Yes.
So
yes.
I wanted to start with, go back to that idea. In your acknowledgements at the end of the book, I'm going straight to the end of the book. You talk about how this book took decades to write.
Yes.
And you talk you thank multiple people. And we met in writing community, and we're still in writing community because of the kind of community we experience.
Exactly. And we're part of Gemini Inc. right here and right now, which is it's cultivating writing community always. Thank you again, Gemini Inc. Yes.
So I wanted you to talk a little bit about community as a writer, how this book transitioned with your writing community over these multiple iterations of it and the process of it. How did community help take care of you and nurture this book into birth?
Oh, I love that question. Well, I love that question. It actually goes back many, many, many years. So I feel like the very first community are my parents and my family, because our mother was quite a reader, and she read aloud to us as children, and she read aloud to us with a very dramatic voice. So she made the stories that she read really exciting and dramatic, and she read stories and she read poems, and I can still hear her voice reading a John Chiari poem in the voice of a cat meowing at this, at a little mouse in the mouse house on the hall wall. And then our father, when we were very small, would make up stories about his childhood as a baby pirate. And that stimulated my imagination tremendously. And they would do this in the circle of family with my brothers. There I was with my three wonderful brothers, one of whom I can see right now. Love you, love you. And so, and that's actually where the book begins, is remembering that beach and that time and how grounding that was. So I feel like that was my very first community. And then I was really fortunate when I went off to Indiana University as an undergraduate. Actually, the poem that actually started this book, although I didn't know it at the time, I wrote as a 19-year-old, my sophomore year of college, and I was taking a poetry writing class. Then I was so fortunate to be already taking a poetry writing class, and I needed to write a poem, and I wrote a poem called The Faceless Day, which ended up being an intervention poem, because it showed me I was heading down a very destructive path, and I needed to decide, am I going to keep numbing myself with substances because I can't quite handle what's happened? I haven't processed this trauma yet, or am I going to commit toward writing? So there was that community. Wow. And then a couple years later, got married, moved to San Antonio as a young woman, 22, 23, and pretty quickly got integrated into the community in San Antonio. Such a blessing. Margie Rowe, you were part of that community. I can see you there, Margie, and Barb, the Stanishes, Barbara Stanish and Carol Raposos, a number of whom are no longer, are no longer with us. But it was, we would get together once a month and just share poems. That was crucial to me as I was in my 20s and really trying to find my voice, and there was this community around me. And I didn't have it for a few years after we left San Antonio and moved to Norfolk for a few years. I tried to recreate it and I couldn't. And it was one of the reasons why we moved back to San Antonio to reconnect. And then I got to take graduate courses at UTSA, and it was just this constant affirmation and expansion. Like here are more poets to read, and here are more ways of thinking about poetry, and here's a way of becoming comfortable thinking about and I don't really want to use the word critiquing. I mean, that was sort of the language that we used at the time, but I think it can be so much more about re-entering a poem that we're working on and listening to it more deeply, so that actually the energy of the poem, we can begin to tune into it again, and it might reveal more to us, and we might enter even more into the wisdom of the poem. Because it's a collaborative process. It's us and the poem and something larger, and our unconscious mind and our conscious mind, and what our body knows, and what the other poets that we've absorbed over the years, and the voices of our mentors. I can still hear Wendy's voice, and the respect that we form for each other as poets, and who we trust with our work. And then I think it's just, I don't know, it constantly reinforces this is important, and we hear you, and I would love to share who I am with you. I've gotten to know so many people really well through their poetry, even before I knew a whole lot about the facts of their lives. I knew their heart and mind. And well, I feel that way with you. Well, your heart and mind and soul, through the poems that we've shared.
I feel the same way. And I'm so glad you talked about it that way, because we're at a time of year when, there is loneliness and for writers, and we are some of us out in the audience maybe are feeling that loneliness, or starting, or maybe they haven't found their community, or maybe their community is a memory, or a person who isn't with us anymore, or a person who's far away, like when you were in Norfolk. And so I just want to emphasize, and I'm so glad you did, how crucial that is, because one of the things that I experience in the community is courage. And the courage to be honest when you have that fearless group of serious writers who are really listening, like you said, as you re-enter the poem and experience it. And that gives you the courage to be more honest with yourself. And if there is revelation and transformation, that it does require that honesty, that courage.
Absolutely.
So, and also, there's so many benefits that are just uncountable, right? With the with the interaction and the affirmations, as you said, but also the many people who helped you with this particular manuscript. You go into, because you came into it and out of it at different times in your life. And so I'm really glad you mentioned the importance of community in that afterward. So I want to move to another interesting question about this amazing book. And it very much reminded me of Basho's the Narrow Road to the Deep North, the Haibun, beautiful travel memoir, where there is prose that we're traveling, we're with Basho the poet, who is giving us his impressions, what his views are, and then we land on the poems, the little haiku. The poems are like these precipices into the subconscious, and yours you're doing that, and your poems are, I feel like yours is, the tightrope into the deep mind. That it's
Mm,
his is the narrow road. Yours is,
mm,
it's very tightly constructed.
mm,
The
mm.
with the prose and the landings, the poems sometimes, as you said earlier, being the center of a chapter. So that must have been a process to accept this. Is it a book of poems? Is it a book of poetry? Do I braid these together? How that to me is a very courageous thing. I've tried Haibun and I sort of fell and stopped, and I would love to go back to it. Can you talk a little bit about that decision and how that process happened? The structure.
Sure. So it just felt very organic. It almost wasn't a decision. And I mean, because as you said earlier, I wrote this over the course of many years, and I have journal entries. I have poems, and so there were times where I was writing poems, and I needed the poems to really capture the whole experience of living in relationship to David, and bearing witness, and how that changed over time. The poems come out of the body and the fullness of who I am. But then there are other times where I needed to ask a lot of questions, and I needed to reflect, and I needed the prose to, as someone put it, the poems were the bricks and the prose was the mortar. And I would be, so when I was doing the prose part, then I would think, oh, this is where the poem enters in. Like this is, and so it just seemed to fold in pretty naturally. And I didn't set out to write a book. There was a decision I made eventually that I thought that maybe this could become a book, and then it was, well, should it become a book? And I eventually answered that question for myself. But it was more, I need to find some clarity. I need to find perspective on this experience. I need to find meaning. I need to disentangle this octopus that I felt had inhabited my gut and my heart and my soul, and was taking up all this room and making it hard to breathe. I needed breathing room, and I just kept using writing in different ways to find that breathing room. So I just felt like it was a natural conversation that arose, and I loved that. I loved that both parts needed each other for the fuller story. Yeah. Just
It's so wonderful to hear that, because sometimes we are not sure what we have in front of us when we're writing, and especially you journal as much as you do. You've been keeping a journal for a very long time.
Yes.
And that is an integral part of this book. We get to read some of those journal entries, which I really loved, because they're close to Cyra. And if anything, I care about you deeply as a friend. I love you so much as a friend. And so having that level of intimacy with someone who has borne witness to something like this felt like that huge, looking into the incredible depths of what the mind would go through. And what a incredible privilege it is to see that, also as a reader, to be in communion with you, to be in spirit with you, and also to understand how this can linger, because this is a subject that maybe, it's hard. It's a very hard subject, and it brings up our deepest fears, our deepest vulnerabilities. And yet it's a universal subject, because it really brings to light the very tenuous thing that it is to be alive, to be human. And so we are, and the incredible the depths of suffering, the great depths of the sufferer, the initial victim of the lost suicide, and then the survivors of that loss. right? The
Yeah,
families and the
yes.
friends and the loved ones and
Yeah.
and the lovers and the people who are living with it. And so when you know someone, it is hard to talk about. It is. I mean, I met you and I knew about it, but I wasn't prepared to. You had this calm energy. You had laughter, you had gentleness, and your poems were very fierce. I mean, I remember them. And I was like, wow, I respect this so much. But to have the journals woven into the book is beautiful. And I want to ask you a little bit about the journals.
Sure.
So you're a poetic medicine practitioner.
Yes. Yes.
And you kept this dream journal, and you talk a lot about dreaming in the book. I'm so glad we got to hear the poetry, how a dream interacts, how a dream can teach, how a dream can release, how maybe a dream can even intervene.
Yes.
Like the Faceless Day poem is an
Yes.
intervention.
Yeah. And befriend. And a dream can be friends.
That's just amazing. So as a poetic medicine practitioner, I'm very curious. I've never talked about this. What have you learned about the importance of dreams and the possible gifts that they can bring? And the importance of the dream journal, which we've all heard about, but maybe we think, oh, one day I'll do it. Many of you might do it already. I've never done it. I've been very immersed in my dreams when I wake up, but I don't get the pen out.
Yeah.
I want to hear about dreams.
First of all, shout out to Alicia Garcia, who is also a certified practitioner in poetic medicine here in San Antonio. Yes.
And E.D. Watson is
and
here.
ED, that's right. ED is as well.
We have 3 of the 4.
And Terry's here.
Well, and that's right. And Terry is not in Texas, but she is, because she's in our hearts. Yes, we have quite a few folks here.
Yes. It's only 4 in Texas.
It will increase, but at the moment, yes. But we were trying to take over the world, one state at a time. So, that's interesting. We should talk more about dreams, shouldn't we? In poetic medicine, we definitely should. So I think, I think that poetry and dreams are very related. Because they're coming partly out of the unconscious mind and partly out of the body, what the body knows. And really, and they're often, I think dreams are often embedded, they're metaphors or parables embedded into dreams. They're full of symbolic language, even as poems are. And some of my favorite poems that I've ever written are based from a dream that I had, like the Owl Woman dream. That is like one of my most, there are a number of poems in the book that are based on dreams. They take us to a deeper, mystical, imaginative, magical world. The threshold, I know they're both thresholds. Dreams and poems are really thresholds between the conscious mind and the unconscious mind, and the human and the natural and the sacred. I think they're, I'm thinking we might need to.
That's beautiful.
Open for questions.
Yeah,
we could
talking.
talk for a long
5 minutes according to the schedule before questions.
Great.
If you would like to, we can do that now though, because there's probably some questions out there already, and I think we have had a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
And someone should ask this question, and so I'm gonna answer. This is an interesting question. I think it probably would come though naturally. We know we're going to encounter fire in this book from the beginning.
Yeah.
And there is a beautiful warning in the book that says, I don't know if warning is the right word, I don't want to offend you, but it's like here in chapter 2, you're going to really see, and you are going to witness what I witnessed. And it's quite there. And the recurring images, you talk a lot about that, of surviving the trauma of witness. And fire is in the title, and yet we have this cool blue cover, and we have water on the cover, and it's a beautiful photograph that your father took.
Yes.
And so
thank you, Dad.
I'm interested in importance of water in this story. And it's interesting that you also say that the choking animal inside was, you call it an octopus, which is a
Octopus,
water
yeah.
animal. Just interesting.
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. Thank you. Thank you.
It's interesting.
Thank you.
Because
Yeah,
water is also a
Yeah.
huge part of your daily life as well.
absolutely.
So
Yes.
let you talk about that.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, so yeah, I am definitely a water person. I need to be in water. I need to be swimming in water. I need to be immersed. I need to be underwater. And I think part of it is when I was very young, like I learned to swim. I think by the time I was 5, Noel, we probably learned by the time we were 5 years old, and we learned to swim in the Atlantic Ocean. We live so close to it. And I was actually born a few miles from the North Sea there in The Hague. But I really discovered swimming after David's death, and there's something so whole about swimming, so whole body, that I think it became a really important part of my integration and meditation, and it just grounds me. It grounds me and centers me again and again and again. It keeps me in my body. It also, and when you're swimming, there is resistance. You've got water to resist against, but it also will make room for you if you find your rhythm, if you find your physical rhythm and your breath. Yeah. So it just, that's my spirit. But I also think I think having some form of rhythmic physical activity is probably a very important part of processing trauma, specifically, whatever that is. I think it's going to vary from person to person, what is right for them, but swimming was definitely, and my body knew right away, like I hadn't been swimming for a while, and then suddenly I was swimming and my body went, oh my God, this is amazing. And you need to do this from now on. It was extremely clear. And I said, I agree. And I've been swimming year round ever since.
The reading about
Swam today.
Yeah.
This morning.
In this weather, reading about the swimming in here is breathtaking. And I invite you all to take, there's so much to learn in this book, so much to experience, because your writing is so experiential. So I think now we're right at 8, and we can turn it over to, and I don't know how to moderate the questions, if I'm going to moderate them, or if our Gemini Ink will do it, but I'm about to cough, so excuse me.
That's okay. We can work together to moderate questions. So I believe we have one question up there from Steve Kellman, asking a question about what we can learn from poets who have taken their own lives.
Oh, what can we learn from them? Well, we have their poetry. I'm awfully glad we have their poetry and their personalities embedded in the poetry, and what were their concerns. And I am sorry that that obviously the writing of the poetry wasn't enough to ease the pain that they were feeling in a more extended way. But I don't want to be presumptuous, but it seems quite plausible to me that the fact that they were writing the poems as long as they were writing the poems might have delayed some of the suffering, some of the depression, some of the illness. I don't know.
We can only conjecture, right? We
Right,
can only
right.
about what that relationship to themselves had been, and how it evolved and devolved. Not to guess, right? But what you talk about is this metaphor, is this container for the pain, and a way to understand it. And so and it's taking the pain, pain is in our body, it moves around. And there comes a time, a friend of mine, just recently, her husband decided to leave the earth through voluntary assisted dying, which is illegal in Australia. And she said to me through the tears, he just couldn't bear to be in his body one more day. And thankfully that assistance is there in Australia. And she reframed how I saw his death. He had told me that he was going to do this, and he had a great plan, music and windows open and beauty and friendship and love. And he said, it's going to be great. And he said, I wish you could come, you would enjoy it. But the idea of couldn't bear to be in the body one minute longer, right? So if the poetry is the container, the art, the expression, the dance, any expression is taking the glass out of the heart, as Sandra Cisneros taught me years ago to think about it as writing takes the glass out of the heart. And sometimes it's a really big piece of glass. We got to keep writing. And it's probably more a question for you than me, but
No,
it's a big one, Steve.
It is a big one. Yep.
But we have their poems. I love that.
We do. And I do want to say that I'm very glad that there is a suicide crisis hotline that is available 24/7, 988. Very simple to remember, 988. I didn't know that until a year ago. And so I think that's like really important information. So if anyone is feeling some ideation, or if you know someone that you're really worried about, you can call that number, and someone who is a trained counselor will be available any time of day or night. And that's very comforting to me. That's really very, very reassuring. Yeah.
All right. So we have 4 questions in the queue.
Okay.
So we'll focus on those 4 questions for the rest. So Violetta Garza says, question, on page 42 of your book, you quote John Fox, Poetic Medicine. Poetry creates a place where you live your questions. Can you speak to your experience around this notion?
Where you live your, yes. Well, and I think part of that quote might also have talked about how writing a poem helps to create an interior space, literally an interior space. And that's how that works for me. I think especially part of the aftermath of the traumatic witness for me was feeling as if I didn't have much of an insight. I felt so shattered and so actually just flattened, as if I wasn't dimensional anymore. And somehow with each poem, I literally felt like I was growing new rooms inside of me where I could sit and think from or feel from, to kind of have a center, feel like I had a center internally. So that's how I understand that quote, that the poem is a place where we can bring our experiences, our questions, our musings, our curiosities, our noticings from the natural world. And because we're taking the time to put them on paper, they become all the more real and apparent to us, and we can engage with them on yet a deeper level, which might help expand the questioning, reflecting, listening process. Yeah, thank you for that question, Violetta. Yep.
Right. So Terry Goslin Jones says, could you discuss how poetry served as a means to foster an ongoing relationship and maintain continued bonds with David? And how might your relationship have grown?
Could you read that one more time, the fullness of it, please?
Okay. Could you discuss how poetry served as a means to foster an ongoing relationship and maintain a continued bond with David? And how might your relationship have grown?
So I love that question. Thank you, Terry. And I think in terms of my relationship with David, there's sort of two things. I think both the dreams that I had about David and still do, like had one about a year ago, and whenever he shows up in a dream, that's so memorable. I kind of want to write a poem about it. So I think that's kind of one way. I also just because the poetry has given me a way to befriend the the challenge of being the witness of his death. The poetry gave me a way to kind of process through that, work through that along with counseling and therapy. I don't want to pretend like I've not had therapy along the way. It took some years, but I think that's a really crucial part of this too. It allowed it eventually I shifted from only remembering his death to being able to remember the fullness of his life. And that made all the difference in the world because we were children together. And for a long time, I couldn't even get to those stories. But once I could get back to those stories and reclaim those stories, then I feel like the friendship between David and myself, very much began to rekindle. And he's just been kind of with me ever since. So I guess to really give you a more essence answer, the poetic engagement has expanded my spirit enormously. And in that spiritual expansiveness, I believe I've been open to receiving David's presence as a spiritual being in the universe. And it's made all the difference in the world. I don't know that I would have. I don't know that I could have had that same relationship with David without the poetry. I can't imagine that I would have. Yeah. Thank you.
Wow. Beautiful.
Right. We have two more questions. So Diane Bertrand says, could you share some of the challenges in bringing this book into its currently printed form? Perhaps share some of the process of envisioning this experience as a book.
Oh, wow. Oh, I could say a lot about that. So I will try to be brief. To me, the first decision before bringing the having it become a book was deciding whether I was going to publish it. And if so, what is the deepest story? Like what really is the deepest story of the book? And there were a number of years when I thought, well, it's a story about recovering from trauma. And then I thought, well, does the world really need another one of those? I'm not so sure. There are really a lot of them and they're good and important and necessary. And I feel like writing about this has been so healing for me. Maybe I don't really need to do that. And then I had a different thought about it. And my thought was actually, I felt like a promise had been made to me by a presence I call voice with a capital V, the night of David's death, that told me it was going to be difficult what I was about to experience and seeing him. And part of me was going to split, but there would be a presence that would be with me, and eventually things would circle around, and and that has definitely happened, and that's because of the spiritual presence of voice and poetry. So that I had to make that decision. I had some really good help editing, doing like final edits from Jen Hager, whom I hope is still here. I'm not sure. Yes, she's still here. Thank you, Jen. In Washington State. Just amazing, such an incredible reader and guide and affirmation. And so helping me really refine the organization of it and kind of question some places and really helping it find its center. Michelle Standish was helpful at a certain point too. Thank you, Michelle. I think you may still be here. So I think feeling like the book is ready, like really, really ready to go off to a publisher was very important. And then finding the right press and having conversations, like the title of the book changed. And we had, originally the working title was My Brother's Cup, and they eventually suggested a different title. I always knew what I wanted on the cover. I always knew I wanted my father's photograph on the cover of myself leaning my head against David, who's holding his head as he reaches away, which is, I think, amazing. And She Writes Press was trying to talk me out of that into a different cover. And that didn't happen, but then they added the water. So I don't know, it's a dialogue. I think it's really important to find people, whether it's your developmental editor, or your readers, or your graphic designer, or your publisher, that they will dialogue with you, that they will be your partners. And She Writes Press has been an amazing partner, I will say, absolutely amazing partner, always trying to educate their authors. Yeah.
All
Thank you,
right.
Diane, for that question.
Thank you. Alicia Garcia asks, how has poetic medicine informed your writing and this book?
Oh my gosh, it is at the core of it. I didn't have the language of poetry as medicine when I was first writing my poems. I just knew that they made me feel so much better. I just felt at home with them. It's the heart of it. I think it's absolutely the heart of it. I didn't really learn about poetry as medicine in a more formal way until I was in my 50s. And then it just seemed to kind of reinforce and give me more theory about it, and then more ways of thinking about how to invite other people into having the experience. But I realized I had been doing it for myself instinctively for about 30 years at that point. And so the practice for myself was already established, and I was grateful for that. Yeah. Thank you, Alicia. Thank you for being committed to this work too. And Terry and Edie, thank you.
So we have one more question that slipped into the queue, and I think this is the perfect question to wrap up our discussion with. So
Thank you.
Lily says, knowing what you know now, do you have an understanding of suicide that transcends our societal judgment?
Oh, wow. Societal judgment. I think I think I'm going to first answer that question from the point of view of being a family member, someone who's taken their life. I think we should never, I don't think there should be any stigma around suicide. Family members need to be able to speak about their experience and not feel judged, and not have their loved ones judged. And we never know what is in the heart and soul of others.
Yeah.
They're suffering. And I think to have compassion and empathy for that is preeminent. I think I'll just kind of leave it. Yeah, leave it at that. Yeah. I guess I would like to say, if you have friends who are going through this, who have had a loved one commit suicide, just be a presence in their life. Be a presence. Just show up and listen. Just be there. Let them know you're there. Let them know you're a safe space and you're there. And if they want to talk, fine. If they don't want to talk, you're there. And try to be willing to do that for a long time. Just be there with them. Yeah. So thank you all, everyone tonight, for being here. So many of you have been so incredibly helpful to my healing over these years. I love you all deeply, deeply grateful. And thank you, Natalia. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, Cyra. And please take the time to fill out our survey, our event survey. It helps us continue to bring you programming that you're interested in, that is thought-provoking, and have a happy holiday, everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all.
Yes.
Love everyone. Love you
Again,
all.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Gemini
And thank
Inc.
you for staying the course with us.
Yes. Yeah.